Welcome everybody to the Asian Philosophies group. Jason will not be able to join us today, but we will have Sashi that will be presenting on the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, as part of our monthly series. And so from here, Sashi, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. All right. So we have been doing a series of lectures or discussion groups on Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad basically means divine and Gita is song. And this is important for us to understand, even though the book and the link that we have sent to you guys to review is an English translation, but the Indian version of it in Sanskrit is very poetic. And this is going to become instrumental in our discussion today on this 8th chapter. So some things that I just wanted to bring our attention to from the past lecture was, where did I lose it? I put a marker on it. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at this one. Okay. One is, let's just, from the 7th chapter, there was a concept that we talked about, which is bhava. Bhava basically is an Indian word to express sort of our inner feelings, our inclinations, if you will, right? State of mind, affections of desire, movements of passion, the reactions of the senses, the limited and dual play of reason, the turn of the feeling and moral sense, right? So it's a compact word that kind of brings attention to a lot of different meanings, and this is going to be another crucial thing for us to remember. We do navigate in this world with some sort of an inclination towards things, be it towards education, be it towards politics, be it towards work, be it towards family, or anything, right, in this world, the transactional world that we live in. So this inclination that we have, it's inclined in a certain direction. So what the chapter 8 is trying to tell us is maybe that needs to be reoriented. And that is what, we're going to talk about this word bhava. And Krishna leaves this last chapter in this, basically this quote, right? He says, because they know me, most people, and here, again, for people who have joined here new, me here, it's as if, like how I was explained to John, right? There are these different ladders of you going from different levels of spirituality, if you will, and you come to this final level, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So this me is this all-encompassing me. So, as I said, the final level is the moksha, the Brahman, if you will, or you are one with your consciousness. Right now, when we are transacting in the world, we are one with our mind, and not just one with our mind. We are sometimes dueling between mind and our intellect. Our intellect is saying, don't do that, but mind says, no, I have to do that because I'm angry or I'm fearful of this person or whatever, right? So we are guided by our mind and our intellect. So the person who has been able to kind of navigate this ladder and go all the way up to the final level, where he now feels like everybody is the same, the Brahman. So that is what this capital me is supposed to identify. So in this book, in this poetry, it's Arjuna is the warrior. He's fighting against his cousin brothers, who are sort of evil in the story. And Krishna is his friend. And Krishna acts just normally, he has girlfriends, girlfriends, and he has, he's just transactional in this world. And nobody knows that he's God or whatever, right? But at this moment, this critical moment when Arjuna says, no, I don't want to fight because I don't want to kill my cousins. There's my grandpa who's standing there, and there's my teacher who's standing there, and I don't want to kill them. So Krishna is basically telling him, reminding him, you not killing them is not going to stop this fight. But all it is going to do is it is going to damage you internally, because you're born to be a warrior. That is your destination. Even if you run away from this war and go to the mountains or whatever, you are going to be doing something wrong out there because you have not followed what you were born to do on this planet. So Krishna, who was supposed to be his friend, now speaks from the deeper voice, right? And sometimes, it does happen to us, right? When we are looking at things, in certain discussions, you will notice that, the person who is acting or providing an observation, somehow that particular observation, even though it just does not feel right at the moment, be it because of our conditioning, social conditioning or whatnot, right? But it just seems like something very brand new and a very eye-opening. So that is that deeper voice that is coming out. You sometimes, big artists like Mozart or whoever, right? They are creating these big pieces of orchestra, music and stuff like that. And many times that process is not very easily converted into some kind of scientific steps. So it is some deeper voice that is as if communicating through them, be it for artwork, be it for writing a poetry, music, or anything that we do, like when we are playing a game, we are in the zone, right? And we call it, we are in the zone. So that is that me that they're talking about, right? So wherever you read the word Lord, blessed Lord is what they use here, has nothing to do with God. The concept of so-called, deity or anything like that. It's just something deeper within us. And we just have forgotten this. Arjuna had forgotten this, and he was just reacting to what he was seeing on the battlefield and what he was probably told by the elders, saying, hey, look, maybe you should back away, maybe this is not good, this is going to hurt the society and this and that, right? So these are those social conditioning layers that we walk about with. There is one human being, but I'm a man, I am a dad, I'm a brother, I'm a sister, or whatever, right? All kinds of layers. I'm a teacher, I'm an engineer. So these layers start building on top of us, which makes us forget the core of me. So he says, because they know me, right? He's talking about the people who have achieved and know at the same time the material and the divine nature of being and the truth of the master of sacrifice, right? They keep knowledge of me also in the critical moment of their departure from physical existence, right? So he's talking about critical moment of their departure. This can be understood as death, but we are going to consider different options here today. And then he talks about material and divine nature. What does that mean? Master of sacrifice. What does that even mean? Right? And have at that moment, their whole consciousness is in union with me. So what does that mean, right? So all these different terminologies that he kind of leaves us in chapter 7, they come about here in chapter 8. So Arjuna basically asks the question on our behalf. He says, what is Tad Brahma? So here he, I think the author, what he did was he left this in English, but he uses a lot of the Sanskrit terms here, unfortunately, which can be quite confusing. There's a lot of Sanskrit that is used in this chapter, unfortunately, but we can talk about that today. So what is Tada Brahma? Well, who is this consciousness? What is this consciousness, right? What is Adhyatma or spirituality? What does that even mean? We have heard about it. And you talk about material nature, this divine nature, this is that Brahma. What is that? And what is this knowledge, right? Adhyatma is knowledge. And what karma, right? So karma we talked about in the first 6 chapters. So if you remember, there was a whole thing about karma yoga, right? How you can use karma to basically purify your path, towards spirituality, right? So you use karma, meaning actions in this world, to not just to get your minor, awards and, happiness and sadness and all of that stuff, but you could actually utilize this life, this conscious life that we have been given as a human being, not as a rock, to when an action comes about, our biggest blockage is our ego. How can I suppress my ego? Not just suppress, but kind of get rid of it. And karma yoga basically tries to tell you is that when you are performing an action, don't worry about the goal. Just do the action, right? Enjoy the action. Don't wait for the result so that you are going to get happy after the result. That's quite a interesting thing that Krishna tells us, right? That and it is interesting, and we notice that every so often, right? That when we are working on something, I don't know, maybe some of you guys enjoy fixing cars in your garage or whatever, right? Yeah, on the weekend. That's a lot of people have that as a hobby, right? So the end product is not fixing the car. Of course it is, but there's some joy that is expressed along the way. And basically, when that rule of karma yoga is followed, or the law of karma yoga is followed, there are a couple of things that start happening. One is you are joyful all the time, right? And the impact of the result, which is success or failure, is not as much, because success leads to ego, and failure will also lead to sadness, and success also leads to sadness, because now once you succeed, you want to go to the next level, right? So you're constantly trying to find happiness, and when happiness comes, you're not really enjoying it because you're going to the next happiness. So you're always looking for tomorrow, right? And the point is now, right? But this here and now is become a very cultural, like a very spiritual thing that everybody talks about. This was already mentioned, right, in Gita. So living here and now, enjoying whatever you need to do. And one more important thing he says is, you should be doing something all the time. Don't become lazy. You have been given this creativity, this creative human endeavor to do something. Action is key. Laziness is not important, right? And we will talk about, like, he covers some more of that, like what is the karma, and Purushottama is just Purusha and Prakriti. We talked about it, right? Purusha is that core of our consciousness, but then from there on, our mind, our intellect, our body, our senses, the objects in the world, and everything else, everything is what we call as Prakriti. And everybody has this core of consciousness, right? We are all conscious beings here. That core of consciousness, most of us who are transacting in the world, we have forgotten about that. We say, nope, it's me, my mind, and my ego. I have done this. And the Purushottama is the higher level of this consciousness who has gone up the ladder, who knows that the reality is the consciousness acting through us, right? So he calls him by that name, Arjuna. And what is declared to be Adibhuta? Adibhuta is basically the Sanskrit word for this material world, right? And Adi Daiva is the divine side of this, everything. Everything here, we have a material side to it, and then there is a conscious side to it, right? So what is Adi Yagya? Adi Yagya is, this master of sacrifice here. So he's saying, like, you said that there is somebody who is enjoying this. the offerings that we give. Who is that, or what is that? Or Madhusudana, this is yet another name for Krishna. And how in the critical moment of departure from physical existence art thou to be known by the self-controlled, right? Now the blessed Lord. So this is just his friend, but he has this deeper, understanding of reality. So he's speaking as if consciousness is speaking through him. The akshara means something that gets destroyed. Something that does not get destroyed, which is immutable, right? That's what akshara means. Is the supreme Brahman. He asks, what is the Brahma, right? So that supreme thing is immutable. And this is something that is the high level thing that you need to remember constantly, right? That's it. That is the most immutable thing, undestroyable, eternal. And rest is all, it comes and goes. So it becomes so-called, relative existence, if you will, right? It's not real. According to Vedanta, according to Hinduism, if you will, only real thing is this undestroying, immutable Brahman, our consciousness. That's the only real thing. But everything else from there on, our brains, our minds, our senses, our body, our objects in the world, because they come and go, they are not real according to Hinduism. So bhava is called adhyatma. We're going to talk about that. Karma is the name given to the creative movement. So, so we all have, if we were to look at the very first time this whole thing started, not very first time, but this is a cycle, right? So the Brahman is just creating this world. So when he is creating this world, that action is a pure action, in the sense that Brahman does not say, oh, you know what, I did it, so I take credit for creating this beautiful universe, or this cosmos, or this planet, or this human being, right? Or at least we don't know about it. So that is that visarga means putting it out there, something that sent forth is the actual word on Google, they say. So it's a creative movement. So Brahman, basically consciousness explodes, and or that Big Bang, if you will, the space-time comes out of it, right? So everything comes out of it, and particles are born, bacterias, human beings, animals, planets, everything that is coming out of that thing, right? That is all going to come and go away, which brings into existence all beings and their subjective and objective states. So Adibhuta is the Ksharobhava. Kshara means destruction. Akshara means no destruction. So Adibhuta is the material side of things. The material is of the inclination of destruction. That's what it is saying. Everything that comes out is destroying constantly. And Adidaiva is the subjective side of the creation. And that subjective side is the Purusha, right? That's the name that they use. I myself am the Lord of sacrifice, meaning I here means the consciousness. So when you enjoy something out in the world, like you're looking at a beautiful flower, the joy that you get when you look at beautiful flower, the joy that you get is primarily because you are conscious being, right? So if you think you are enjoying that flower, you're enjoying only because you're conscious. So what it is trying to propose is that consciousness is trying to enjoy that flower through you, and the flower has brought about that beauty. That's why consciousness has made itself appear as that beautiful flower. And this can be then, extrapolated to any sorts of things, right? It could be your girlfriend, boyfriend, right? Maybe you're in a very loving relationship, So the love that you feel for that person, it could be a mother-son relationship, that love that you feel for that other person, or that attraction that you feel, is because of you being conscious. And the other person is also participating in that because of their being conscious, right? So it is really, the consciousness is playing through both of these parts. So now suddenly everything basically, if you will, becomes a sort of like a uh, uh, a vessel for God, So in the boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, the boys also, there's an element of God in it, and girl also has the element of God in it. So they are, and that Godhood is helping them enjoy each other's company. And that is, he says, I am the one that the offerings come to, Adi Yagya, in the body. Best of embodied beings. So let's just look at some of the notes that I've captured here. So yeah, we covered a lot of this. He who continually remembers me, thinking of none else. Yeah, we'll talk about that. All right, so here's an example, something that, maybe we should think about, like when we are seeing things, there are certain aspects of it that we are actually paying attention to. It could be, in this case, the black window, it could be the green grass, it could be the cloud, it could be the sun. For everything that we are observing out there, we really don't have a mechanism with our senses to observe it holistically. We are constantly either biased by our views to maybe you're out there for window shopping. So here you're looking at the window. Maybe you are worried about the climate or something, and you're looking at the clouds, you're enjoying the greenery. So one tends to look at things based on their perspective. And this is basically those, the 6 blind men, 7 blind men, I forget what that story was about, how they were talking about their experience when they were touching the elephant, right? So it kind of aligns with that. So Arjuna was one of the kings, one of the warriors. And when there was a chance for him to kind of, there was a choice given to Arjuna, and Arjuna's brother is Duryodhana. They both actually go to Krishna. Krishna is a king of another kingdom, and they both are given a choice to like pick, who do you want? Krishna says, you have 2 choices. There is my whole army, which has 100,000 or whatever, 1 million soldiers in it. And the other side is Krishna, me. He says, you got to pick between these 2. So he gives Arjuna the first chance. And Duryodhana, who is sort of like the evil brother, he's suddenly worried, like, oh, Arjuna is now going to pick the whole army. This is going to be unfair. Why did Krishna give him the first chance? But anyways, there's a backstory to that. But so Arjuna basically says, Krishna, I don't want your army, but I want you on my side. So this is really important to understand. And Duryodhana on the other side, right? Internally, he's suddenly very happy, elated that, oh, thank God, he's going to get Krishna, but I'm going to get the whole army, and I'm going to win this fight, right? So he is operating from fear and desire, from the point of view of the war, right? He is looking at some benefit that he's going to see in this space-time so-called relative world. But Arjuna chooses Krishna. So there are these, if you will, there are these 2 pathways, right? One is like going upwards, if you will, on that ladder, and one is kind of reaching downwards. So this chapter eventually is going to want you to, most of the time we are constantly in this realm, down here. And it is going to want us to think in terms of like, how can you think spiritually in every choice that you make? Many a times, there's this term that is used in psychology, which is confirmation bias. Our view shapes our individual world, and that becomes our reality. So there is a way to look at things out there, and depending on what your inner state is, that's what you would start seeing out there. And that sort of, it becomes a confirmation of like, oh yeah, I thought that this person was a thief or something, and yeah, there it is. And we build our own fantasia, if you will, right, in our mind about this whole world. So in that sense, if you think about it, what Vedanta is trying to tell you is that whatever you're dealing with on this plane, in this space-time, is really a made-up fantasy in your mind, your biases. And that's why it is very unreal. It is going to come and go. Whatever gives you happiness, it's going to go away. Whatever gives you sadness is also going to go away. So the goal can be a couple different things, right? So the goal will be, there are two ways to go about things. One is Purusha, or the immutable Brahman. Why do we want to go in that direction? Because you want to get unshackled from the material way of living, the bottom side of the things that I talked about, and that is the Prakriti. And because we talked about this in last chapter, everything that is in Prakriti or the material world is very hypnotic. It basically makes us think that that is the reality, and that is what we keep basically, that becomes our reality, and we live in that way for the rest of our lives. And that is something that we want to get away from, right? And it causes a lot of damage on the planet too, right? The way we deal with the environment, the way we deal with the people or anything, the way we deal with our kids or our loved ones, that too. The way I see the breakdown in this chapter is there's a talk that is given, and oops, sorry, the animation is kind of messed up. And then he talks about how to walk the talk. Oh, sorry, this is all messed up. Sorry. And then there are some pitfalls. Okay, I messed it up. Anyways, so yeah. Brahman is immutable, Maya is our hypnotic life, path is to steady our mind. Karma is meant to dissolve our desires, right? You use every action that you do out there, you want to use it to dissolve your ego, dissolve these desires that you have, and that is the meaning of karma. Prakriti is full of desires, and our hypnotic state keeps us in the grip of karma. Purush is giver of life, right? If there was no consciousness, we wouldn't be alive. I mean, our body parts, if they're broken from our body and they're left out there, they wouldn't be able to do anything, so our hands move and our eyes see because of consciousness, and it becomes joyful. And that's why Purusha is the enjoyer of our offerings, offerings being any action that you do, and that action can be a good action, evil action, or it could be one of these karmas that he's talking about, where you are dissolving the desire. When you're dissolving the desire, it can be quite tormenting, because that's not the way we tend to live in the world, right? We are greedy, we want things, and we want to, we are happy when it is successful, we are sad when it's failure. So how to not do that, and to avoid this mind's necessity to kind of feel sad and angry and fearful and all of that, it takes a lot of work. So that is the sacrifice that they're talking about, and the offering, where you kind of control yourself at that moment. Don't let the success bother you, and neither should the failure bother you when you're doing something. Remembering Purush, even during death, reaches me ultimately, right? So this is that thing that he says about like, hey, what happens at the end of time? So end of time or end of our lives, that last moment is something that we will talk about, right? But even during death, the thing about death is we just don't know when it is coming. So it'll come at any moment. So also let's say we are happy right now, and everything is going fine, and we know that in the next 5 hours there's not going to be any death. Let's say, but as we live our lives, let's say we get to age 85 or whatever, 90 and stuff like that, we are now at the doorstep of death. The entire life, the way we have lived, has not really prepared us for that. What is the preparation? Is at that moment, now that you're going to exit the planet, you don't want desires to be bothering you. That's the goal of Hinduism, right? So when the desires are bothering you at that last moment, in fact, the desires bother you the most when you're not able to enjoy, right? Our body parts are going to get weaker. And at the time of death, we're like, oh, I did not do that, and I did this wrong, and I did this good, and all that stuff is going to bother you a lot. And so the last moment is going to be very, very painful. So along the way, you want to constantly, he says, remember me constantly, right? What that means is that all these desires, as you follow your karma and do your karma and all of that stuff, you want to slowly kind of turn down the need for things, greed and all of that stuff, right? And so as you come to that last moment, you kind of feel like, okay, I'm satisfied. Now I can go, right? And so this is what he kind of tells him through number 7. And then he talks about like, how can we do that, right? And then, he talks about yoga. Yoga practice is the way to culture this constantly remembering state. So any action we do, we want to remember that it's really consciousness acting through me, and in this other person is also the consciousness acting through that person. So there's no room for hatred or over adulation, right? And for us to come to that state, yoga, not the yoga that you might get to see in Santa Monica or anywhere else, right? The yoga as it left India and went to Western countries, it really killed its real intention, which is what has happened to a lot of the religion and practices and stuff like that. And yoga, we'll talk a little more about that. The ultimate purpose of bringing a balance in your body with all those contortions is really bringing a balance on your mind. And what does balance of mind mean? Meaning there's no desire that is going to fluctuate your mind, or there's not anything out there that is going to cause you a pain and stuff like that, right? So he says yoga is important. How do you do that? Close all the doors of desire, basically our senses, right? You've got to pull the energy away from it. With heart, heart doesn't mean that palpating muscle in our body, right? It's just, you want to do it with love. You want to do it with intention. You want to do it with determination, right? Not in the sense that somebody's forcing it on you, but if you love something, like the example that I gave, which is some people who have the hobby of fixing their car on the weekend, right? They don't do it because somebody has told them to do it, right? So it's just something that they like to do it. And people go sign up in educational institutions. Sometimes it is by force, but you go there and you say, okay, this is what I've signed up for. Next 8 years, I'm going to be busy in this, and I don't understand any of this stuff, but I'm going to be determined to learn this and understand this, right? With heart, calm the mind. And there's another interesting thing about heart and mind that one of the Swami explains is that the um, the oops, sorry, the when thoughts come up in our mind, so mind exists only because of thoughts, right? That is one of the things that Hinduism wants us to remember. If there were no thoughts, mind is kind of, I mean, you might as well say it's dead. But or it is there, but it is useful for again, thinking. uh, so you use it as a device. But these thoughts that are coming up are again your heart's desires, right? So there is something that you think is lacking. So it is as if these thoughts emanate from your heart because you've seen something out there, or something makes you angry or passionate about, or whatever, So a lot of these hearts, they want you to think as if it is coming from your heart. And so heart being the sort of like the foundation or the place where all these thoughts come up and then they die, right? When the desire comes up, you go with your hands or legs or eyes or whatever, you go do satisfy that, and then you get tired of that desire, so that thing kind of goes back, right? So everything that so it's as if heart kind of is a permanent foundation out of which these thoughts come about, mind comes about, right? So you have to go from the mind to the heart to really calm the mind, right? It's as if you're looking at waves, but you're looking at the waves from the waves perspective, or wave being the mind, the thoughts. Then you're going to say, oh, you know what, I am the wave and I'm going to die, and look, there's another wave, there's a bigger wave, there's a smaller wave, and all that stuff, right? But now you move your perspective to the ocean. Ocean has lots of waves. Ocean's point of view, these waves come and go, so it's not really bothered about them. But if you're looking at it from the waves perspective, you're kind of bothered, right? You're saying, oh, that wave is bigger than this wave, and all that stuff, right? So anyway, so the yoga practice basically involves, we can talk more about it, but Om becomes an instrumental word, doesn't really mean anything. That's what the Hinduism says, that Om, sort of like Amen, I guess, in Christianity or Muslim. So Om is something that it is a foundational vowel or a word or a letter, if you will, because it is made out of a, u, ma, and that a, u, ma now basically helps you. It's basically the word, the a, u, ma is covering the whole throat all the way up to your lips. So all the other words sort of come out of it, right? So that's what Om is. But anyways, so in this state, once you have done this, you use Om to control your thoughts in that state. And once this becomes a practice, it becomes easier for you to deal with it in any kind of painful situation in life. And, finally, death is a painful situation, right? And then rebirth basically means that, of course, there's the life and death and then the rebirth back. But you can, we don't know what happens really, right? So this is just a theory. But in reality, what we do know is that we have been a child, we have been teenagers, we have gone to a different school, we have had a girlfriend, and we have had whatever, So there are these different lives that we have lived along our whole lifespan. And every time we go from one state to another state, it's as if you have died. You were not a dad at one point, but when the child is born, now you're a dad. That is your dad's life. So as you're going from one state to this other state of your being, it's as if you have died. So that is sort of like a rebirth, right? And that rebirth is happening because there was, as you're going from this state to the next state, there was a desire lingering, and that caused that next state, right? So this is again, going up the ladder with this particular walk the talk situation. Um, um, and if you die with some kind of desire, you're going to be reborn. But the good thing is that if the fact that you're listening to this class or you're doing philosophical understanding of life and all of that stuff, right? So you're already on the path of upward traveling on the ladder, right? So even if you die, what Hinduism wants you to remember is that your mental impressions that you've had in this life are going to be staying with you as you pass on to the next life. But these mental impressions, because you have, the desires have become sort of purified desires, if you will, right? They're not of some lowly things, but something different. So the new life that you're going to get is something that will help you continue that journey. And the point is, you're going up the ladder and you're going to reach the Brahman, right? So there's nothing to worry about, is what Krishna is trying to tell us. And then he goes into this whole thing about time starts with Brahma's day and chases us through night. Now, I phrased it that way, but he talks about Brahma. There's 1,000 years as his days and thousands of years as his night and all of that stuff, right? So the way to understand this is that, when we are born, or let's say even, when we have had a deep sleep, in the deep sleep, nothing is the problem, right? Our mortgage is not a problem. Insurance is not a problem. Nothing is a problem. There's no upcoming thing that you have to fix or anything like that. And, you are in that deep state connected to your consciousness at that point. You're still conscious because as you come awake, you know that you have slept like a baby. So that waking up, and now you are in this space-time world here. Now suddenly you notice, oh boy, I have a meeting coming up at 9 a.m. or I have to go to this doctor's appointment. I have to go to this. And, so time suddenly appears for you. And the time brings about it with it some challenges. And you go through your day, chasing all the life's problems, and then the night comes, right? And as you get towards the latter part of the day, the worries that the daily existence has brought to you kind of weighs on you in the night. And it becomes sort of darker moment in some situations, depending on what you're going through in life. Or it could be some elated, very happy situation, but understand that happiness is not the bliss that Hinduism is talking about, because that happiness is very limited happiness. So one way to think about this is that, if anything, when we were in the deep sleep, that state is the real knowledge. Not so all the science and all of that's knowledge too. So last lecture we saw that there are two kinds of knowledge, right? So jnana and vijnana. Vijnana is something about the world, but jnana is something about the consciousness. Now, deep sleep, it happens to be something that we don't understand, so we don't treat it as knowledge. But the state of samadhi, or the state of going up the ladder all the way to that final state, is also kind of similar to that state, but you are wide awake at that point, right? So that is considered as the day. And as you're chasing all the life's troubles, that is considered as kind of like, you're walking towards the darkness, and that is that ignorance, right? And nothing to worry about. You are going to deal with the transactional world. And, God forbid, if you die, As long as you have been on a path of good things, your next life is going to be something good, and you're going to continue walking up that ladder. And so that's path of light leads to Purusha, rest, return to human body. Yeah, we talked about this. All right. So I guess I'm going way too slow. Does anybody have any burning questions at this point, or can we keep going? I'm sorry, I'm only on slide 2. I have 4 more slides. Surprisingly, I only have small slide set. But anyways, I'll keep going, and then we'll take another break a little bit later on. All right. Sorry. Therefore, at all times, remember me and fight. He says, Krishna says at this point, whoever leaves this body and departs remembering me comes to my bhava, again, my inclination towards upward path, right? The Purushottama, my status, whosoever at the end abandons the body, thinking upon any form of being, to that form he attains. So this is kind of interesting, now, remember, this is a poetry, right? So you can say, okay, at the deathbed, if you're thinking about chicken, you're going to become a chicken in your next life. That is one way of looking at it. But if you, from moment to moment, right, if you finish this particular state of your existence or this moment with a certain desire of, like, I don't know, XYZ, whatever. So your next state of existence is going to take that form because you want to fulfill that desire, right? That's really what he's trying to say here. Therefore, at all times, remember me and fight. So one of the Swami kind of expounds on this really interestingly. He says that, look, here he is talking to Arjuna, where he's saying to him, hey, please, you gotta be your own warrior. Warrior is your destination. You have to fight this battle. And the battle is going to happen regardless of you running away from it, right? So this is also a call to action for us, right? All times remember me and fight. Now, think about it, right? Arjuna or any warrior or any battles that have happened, you're usually fighting somebody who is, you don't know, like, pick Iraq war or whichever war. So it becomes easy to kill that person. You don't know that person. So Arjuna has this dilemma because he is trying to kill or fight with his brothers, his grandpa, his teachers, and, his friends on the other side as well, actually. So it becomes a bit of a dilemma for him. Now, bring that even closer. With us, we are fighting with many me's. Many me's are happening because of so many desires. We are fighting with anger. We are fighting with fear. We are fighting with our ego. And these are really just us. Nobody has any say in that. This is something that I have to deal with, I versus I. And that is even more harder. And then, do you justify your anger? Do you justify your fear because you're living on this in this world, and which is what we end up doing, right? So that's where you got to fight, right? That is that fight. And when you are dealing with this, if you have this higher understanding of your being and not following just your mind or your brain, blindly, it becomes the fight can be a winning battle. For if thy mind and thy understanding are always fixed on me, right? Many a times our mind and our understanding are going against each other. Mind might say something, but then our understanding or our intellect might say, no. If you do that, you're going to go to jail. So here what he is saying is that, you have your mind fixed on consciousness and your understanding fixed on consciousness, in the sense that, you don't want the mind to just follow what your social conditioning or your senses are basically telling you to do out of greed, fear, anger, and all that kind of stuff. Are always fixed on me, on and given up to me. To me thou shalt surely come. For it is by thinking always of him, with a consciousness united with him in an undeviating yoga of constant practice, that one comes to the divine and supreme Purusha, O Partha, right? Undeviating yoga. This supreme self is the seer. So let me switch to my slides a little bit here. I'm going to skip this slide, so it's taking way too long to cover that. Yeah, so we can talk a little bit about this here. Okay. So we have seen this in yogic practice. There are these different chakras, right? These are sort of like our state of being at a given moment of time. And most of the time we are dwelling in these bottom three layers. And the idea is to kind of move ourselves up here. Yoga, as we understand, we tend to think it is all about the body and exercise and all that stuff. While that is good, exercise is supposed to kind of bring that endorphin rush and all of that stuff to kind of make you feel a bit more stronger. And what does that even mean, that strength? Remember, we talked about how mind and intellect are always at odds with each other. Now, and your action, right, out there. So the strength is going to be needed for you to have your intellect and your action in sync. When that happens, you are actually completely a balanced individual. When you know that this is the right thing to do, and that is exactly what you do, so you don't have any dilemmas, that is that integrated strength that you're supposed to gain from yogic practices, right? So yoga has multiple meanings. One is yoga is the practice of knowing that self, that consciousness, through all the exercises that you do, right? Leads to yoga, right? Yoga leads to yoga. One of the things about Indian Sanskrit language is the same word can mean many things. So yoga can also mean the practice, the exercises, and what leads to self, but also means meeting or uniting with self, right? That's yoga to get to yoga. So in one of the phrases, he says that the knack is bhakti. Bhakti is yet another term that we should remember. It has to do with devotion. Or, remember how I mentioned earlier that when you are going on this path, you're doing it out of love, right? Love to yourself, love to mankind, and all of that, right? And what kind of love is that? It's one example that I can think of is just this, when you're a baby, there is a natural inclination towards your mother, and you know that your mom is never going to do anything bad to you. And that's sort of a constant reminder to yourself that when you are a conscious being, you are in the embrace of the consciousness, the Lord, if you will, right? If God helps this discussion, then maybe that's something that you can rely on, a deity or something, and that's sort of a trust, not blind trust on some rituals and rites. That's not what is being mentioned here. People do understand it that way, but that's not the intention. When you deeply understand what the text is trying to say, it is about you trusting the universe, if you will, right? I mean, if you were to use a very colloquial terminology for this, And that trust is, it's a loving trust. And that is the bhakti. And that is something that, it's a knack. Not everybody is gifted with this because we live in this transactional world. So it has to be cultivated, and it'll come to you, because you will see that good things and bad things that are happening, you come to a state where you realize that, oh, this something horrible happened, but there was the silver lining. Let's say you got laid off from a job, you got laid off, but then it gave you a chance to explore some other kind of a job or whatever, right? So eventually things sort of start getting better. And the point of that is that you are not going to get angry or fearful of life's situations. When you're not angry and fearful, you're going to be dealing with life more realistically, more practically, not emotionally, right? So all of these practices, suggestions, really the deeper intention of this is that, day-to-day existence becomes a little more easier. You still have to act in this world, you still have to transact, you have to do whatever you have to do. But now you're going to be doing it in a little more less confused mind, if you will, right? And of course, when you come to a problem with that kind of state of mind, you're going to act properly. And, there's more likelihood that you're going to win that, whatever action you have been called upon. So, we need, our body needs constant breathing, nutrition, all that good stuff, right? In the state of consciousness, right, one of the nutrition that you need is that constant remembering. When we are talking about mind and heart and intellect and consciousness, right? So these are very subtle, non-gross, non-materialistic type of existences. We really don't know what they are made of. So in that realm of our existence, because there is this realm of body existence, but then we do have the realm of like friendship, hatred, love, mind, consciousness, heart, there, one of the Swami kind of compares that to saying that just like you need breathing, your body, you need this thing called as remembrance. Remembrance in the context of this devotion and all of that stuff, right? One misunderstanding is, you could use it for a better purpose, is the morning prayers, if you will, that in Hindu practices, in Hindu houses, they do that morning, evening prayers. And, most religions have some form of a prayer. That prayer, most of the time, tends to be very transactional again, in the sense that you think that God is going to come and help you in your worldly matters. That needs to be turned around. That needs to be more about like, oh, consciousness or God or whoever that you want to believe in, or you want to help you guide in your life. You're saying, I'm happy that, you're there. And I trust whatever you're going to put forth in my life, there's a purpose for it, right? There is that trust. And that is one way recommendation to utilize the concept of prayer, if you do pray. And all of these, right, these are devices. Yet what has happened in most of the religions, and Hinduism more so, I would say, is people have stuck in their ways on those ladders. As you're moving up, let's say you're in rung number 2, you're just stuck there. You're stuck in your normal prayers and worships and rituals and all of that stuff, right? You could utilize them and understand that deeper meaning and get to that next level. So being in sync, that that you want to be in sync with that universal existence or the consciousness. And we covered this in earlier lectures, which is Sat Chit Anand. Sat is existence, awareness, and the bliss. So understand that this is where we come from. We come from existence, awareness, and bliss. And why not live like that all the time? Conscious, blissful existence, right? So that is effectively the knack of this devotion, and understanding that I'm part of that something bigger than this worldly existence of being a dad or a brother or a sister or politician or whatnot. Yeah, we sort of covered this. Yeah, so yeah, this is another thing, right? So thoughts are useful. Thoughts, intellect is very useful in dealing with the world, and utilize it. Those are devices as well, that we have a mind for a reason, not for the mind to take over us, but use the mind to solve the world problems or whatever, whatever life problems, right? And they tend to be very needed in this world outside. But when we are talking about mind, heart, and going up the ladder, thoughts are not going to be enough. So understanding this based on your ability to think is only going to get back into the material world, right? So this is what happens many times. We think that spirituality or attaining peace is going to help me become a better, now that is a side effect, that it does make you a better person, but you tend to do, or not you, many of us tend to do the spirituality practice because you think it is going to make our worldly greed more real. This whole law of attraction and all that, it's basically a twist on this whole thing. Yet they want you to stay stuck in the bottom three ladders, not go up. So if you focus on your work properly without thinking about the outcome, and you do it, now you're 100% into that action, of course you're going to do a better job than constantly worrying about, oh, am I going to be happy? Is my boss going to be happy? Is my wife going to be happy? Blah, 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 right? So that is going to weigh on your mind. So in the spiritual pathway where, there is no other, there's nobody that you have to show off to. It is really a conversation with yourself, if you will. Thinking is not going to get you too far, right? So there is this other thing which we talked about, which is the inclination, right? So when you are doing any action in the world, rather than thinking it from the material or the prakriti side of it, think of it from Purusha side of it, right? That, hey, it's a consciousness acting through me. I need to remove myself from this. I'll still act, I'll still do the thing. And the side effect of that is you might actually do a better job, but now your ego is not playing a role. You're not hurting anybody. You're not feeling hurt by anything that might happen out of that action, right? So bhava is important in that realm. These are two different realms, right? One is of the material side and the other is non-material side. And there, your thinking and intellect is not going to be enough. And the point is that everything that you do, you need to have this constant remembrance that this is happening because of my consciousness. And, if you believe in God, very useful actually to utilize that more to walk up that ladder, right? Don't get stuck on just the God piece. So, yoga, as we said, is the practice. The goal is yoga, meaning meeting with ourself, our higher self. And yoga is ultimately actions are in sync with knowledge. So you don't feel guilty, you don't feel egoistic, you don't feel anything, when you have acted. Lot of this is, I keep bringing up this example of a samurai. warriors in Japan. Samurai warriors, they have this this kind of a thinking process where when they are out to fight, that fight, the action of war, is not driven by anger or greed. So they're very zen in that state, if you will. Arjuna is sort of like, what Krishna is trying to tell him is, be a samurai warrior. And same thing with us, right? We are fighting with ourselves. So, do the same thing. So as you are doing this exercise, right, remember, as you are practicing this step becomes very natural. One of the things that they say in meditation, we covered this in chapter 4 or 5, I think, where we talked about like how we want to be in the state of like looking at our nose and sort of concentrating on something. And that is the meditation practice that we are told about. So our focus is right here, right? So that focus right here, we can kind of fake it. But if you start living this life, the focus starts moving upwards, not downwards. It's not about our guts, not about the bottom parts. It's more about up here, right? So it becomes a little more effortless. The meditation becomes a little more effortless, if you will. And in that state, right, when you come up here in this Agya Chakra, now think about it, right? This is the state where you have understood that it is not me, it is the consciousness that is working through me. And that consciousness, because you've also gained the ability to see consciousness in this other person, their actions, their future actions, and all of that, it's sort of, you become a bit more clairvoyant, if you will. This is not magic. This is just that, you kind of can assess what the other person might do, if you will, right? So you become sort of a seer. And the seer, the Sanskrit word that they use is kavi. Kavi is also a word that is, the meaning is poet. So if you look at any poetry, they are taking it from the prose content and taking it one level higher, the literature. And then now you have to kind of decode that. But people who understand it, the abstract form of that thing, they can do marvels with it, right? And again, our perspective matters there. But for somebody to take a very materialistic aspect of life and convert that into poetry, it takes a lot of work, right? And that's why that literature is so respected. But here, in this context, kavi or poet is used to identify this person who has understood the point of why you want to act from here, up here, right? And you suddenly start, getting this sort of like a clairvoyance, if you will. You have a better vision of what is going on and what my action should be. Not that you should be thinking of this as like, oh, I can now suddenly read the dreams, or, I can now tell you what is going to happen to you, like, I don't know, a month from now, or the whole practice of astrology and all that. No, that's not what it means. It really just means like, we feel that many a times, right? When we have a good understanding of a problem, scientists or engineers and, whatnot, they look at a problem based on their lifetime of practice. They suddenly know, like if you take this path for this problem, it's going to be a downfall. There's going to be a problem here. So then they correct the course, right? That's really all that it means there. And the wisdom that you get at this point is really one of those truest form of the wisdom, not about, like, let's say, quantum physics or anything like that, right? While that is all good, but that is all related to the space-time reality that we think is real. But that wisdom that you get through this exercise is one of that immutable. It's a very ancient thing. Somebody today who appreciates this and comes to that state is the very same state that Buddha came, or Krishna came, or Jesus came, or Muhammad came, or whoever, right? When they have risen, that wisdom that they get about life is exactly the same through the eons. And that is the Purana, is the word that they use. And that's where one of the interesting thing about this kind of thinking is it is wanting us to get back to our Christness, our Buddhahood within us, our Krishna within us, right? Not that there's somebody out there and I need to look up to that person. While that is all good, it's one of those devices that you're going to use to walk up the ladder. But at some point you have to, the whole idea here is to find that Christness within you, find the Buddhahood within you. And that is what is going to be the truest end goal of this journey, right? They say that even the gods or people who are in heaven, they don't have this ability that we have been given as human beings to appreciate this fact that we actually have the means, the consciousness, the brain, the thinking power, and all of this stuff to really get this wisdom while we are alive. Gods don't have that because they are lost in their happiness, heavens, and of course, people who are dwelling in the hell, they are worried about the problems over there. But just the fact that we have been given this human existence, the end goal of that is to really decipher or decode life itself, right? And in every action should kind of lead towards that. And we'll talk about this Om and Ram in a moment. So what should be the culmination of every moment, all the way up to the death, right? In this context. So these bottom three are sort of this wheel, we are stuck in this wheel forever, unless we understand this, right? And by the way, this wheel also happens to be the chakra on the flag, the Indian flag, but that's just a side note. So here we are born. Don't worry about these arrows on the right hand side, we will get there. We are in the mother's womb, and now we've grown up, teenagers, whatever, middle life, and all that stuff. Many eyes are born, right? At that point, we are I as a father, I as a son, I as a grandpa, I as a mother, I as a sister, I as a teacher, I as an engineer, right? And we tend to change our behavior depending on the context that we are dealing with in the world. Many times these are the roles that the world has given to you. It could also be your own imagination, right? You might feel like you are whatever, something. And then that, you're angry about, you take a position about something, you get angry about a certain political situation or whatever, right? That becomes your one of the eyes, if you will. And the goal is to get to a state where there is one eye, right? That is very difficult. If you look at our lives, we are filled with many eyes all the time, constantly. So the goal is to get to that one eye, and it's a difficult process, but every so often life brings us there, and we tend to call it an existential crisis, if you will, right? And that is what has happened to Arjuna in this state, where he's wondering, like, what am I doing? Why am I fighting with my brothers? Is this really even a good thing? And then, while he's talking about all that, Krishna is trying to make him think about this deeper question, like, who am I? Am I the warrior, or am I somebody who's going to run away from the battle? So that kind of thing, right? So that happens to us all the time. And then you want to get to the state where there is no I, right? Remember that birth in your mother's womb, there was no I. And there's a state that comes with the yogic practices that is also a not I, but it is much more aware than this child, this baby in the mother's womb. And then there's that final state where everything is I, right? Everywhere is Brahman. You can actually see that. This one I basically brings you to this question, who am I? And this is where you rest the mind in the heart. Thoughts, we talked about this. So this is also the same as the heart chakra here. Heart chakra is the anahat. Anahat basically means that, something that doesn't have, like a clap needs two objects. So anahat just is like this one thing. And that is kind of sort of representing one I, yet there is some sound. So that person is wondering, where is this anahat noise coming from? If I close my eyes and everything is gone, there is something. And it is very alive. What is that? Who am I? Right? That is that, that is a deeper, we tend to call it as existential crisis. It's not a crisis, actually. It's the journey upwards. So going upwards here requires, Krishna talks about this, where, he says that, your life force is sort of dependent on where you are in situation wise, where you are in your life, right? If you're more worried about the body, you are at this bottom chakra, the root chakra. And as your thinking process kind of improves, it kind of brings you up here, and you tend to dwell in these three different states. They tend to be about the body or the mind, and your ego, and all of that's power and knowledge that you gain on this, reading books and all of that stuff, right? But beyond this, you're going to need some other help. Your thoughts are not going to help, right? So you have to, one of the things that he said, close all the doors and, senses, and let that life force get away from your body. Meaning, when we meditate, we kind of sit down in a place. We're not running around. We're not flailing our arms or doing anything, not worrying about coffee or anything like that, right? So the life force is kind of, your body senses have calmed down and it has moved upwards, right? So it is starting to move upwards, and you bring it into your head at that point. Concentrate the energy near the eyebrows. And, many a times when we are doing this, the worldly thoughts still come about, right? Your ego, your mind, your job, this and that. So it kind of keeps us constantly pulling us down here, right? So how do we control that a little bit, right? So this is where you start using the word Om, or, one of the Swami also suggests Ram. And instead of just saying Om, you say Om, like, right? So let it extend a bit longer. What that does is, the fact that you are about to utter O and you stretch it out, that stretching sort of stops the thought process, and you come down, and that is almost kind of like bringing you down here. And some of the thoughts will appear, but then you again remind yourself and you go into the state of Om. And so the slower you tend to do this, the number of thoughts are going to reduce for you. And that is going to bring you to this state of the Vishuddha chakra. And a contemplation is key, right? Here, O arises from, as you're speaking, sorry, I mistyped there. And M basically dissolves that thing. So it's as if universe has come about and it is dissolving, right? And where the sound comes about and where it goes, it comes from the same point, and then it disappears in the same point, right? And this is something that you try to focus on, that silence. Oh, even before the O starts, there is a certain amount of silence there. So that silence is the foundation of all the words that are coming out, right? So as you focus on that, that is going to help you let the I disappear, because now you're focused on this stuff, right? Now at this stage, many a times, you as you're rising up here, the goal is for you to build a mind without any impressions from what is happening out there. So that whatever that is happening out there is going to determine your next state in this life, also your rebirth, if you believe in rebirth, which is what this book is trying to recommend. But it has a deeper understanding just from our existence on this planet, right? So mind is dissolved eventually, if this practice is done, into consciousness, right? So now consciousness is the boss, and it is using mind and the intellect and our body parts and everything as instruments, and it is in full control of the chariot. We have talked about the analogy of chariot many times in the beginning, as against down here, many eyes, the horses are pulling the chariot every which way. So the chariot is going to fall apart. Life falls apart. And when that happens in this state, there is every action that you do is now in sync with your understanding, if you will, right? So you are not going to do something harmful out of spite, out of anger, out of fear. So there is nothing to worry about. There's no sin accrued. There's no ethics that you would need, right? There's no external 10 commandments, if you will need. You will act if the moment calls for you to fight, if the moment calls for you to kill somebody, if the moment calls for you to do whatever, because it's a pure action, it's not driven from ego, it is a sinless action. So there's really no idea of heaven, hell. So this whole concept of birth and death is us taking these different states in our lives. So that's not going to happen. You're going to be, externalities will change. You will go through a family, whatever, all kinds of crises and good things and bad things in life, but you remain the same. You understand that, you're connected with the consciousness. But, in all of these things, there is a chance that you might fall down the path here. And when that happens, there's nothing to worry about. While we have to watch out for it, depending on where you are on this ladder, the next life that comes about, or the next state in your current life, is going to be guided by that last understanding of this knowledge, right? And so it's all good. Eventually, you're going to come out of it. So just one more thing, and then we'll just open the floor. What this has to do with what we understand from the physical sciences today. Niels Bohr and Max Planck were very instrumental scientists in the field of quantum mechanics, and Einstein and physics and all of that stuff, right? So they kind of surprised the world by basically coming up with this whole uncertainty principle, and the fact that as you poke down into an atom, into the matter, into molecule, atom, electron, proton, neutron, everything deeper, 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 there's no matter there. There's nothing there. There's nothing. Literally, it's a particle becomes a wave, and then it changes to particle. So what we see ourselves as this physical being really is filled with nothing. So he basically has this very interesting quote. It says, I regard consciousness as fundamental, which is sort of very similar to what Vedanta says. Everything we call real is made of things that cannot be regarded as real, right? This is yet another very interesting comment. And the goal for us in this life is, do we want to be conquered by matter or conquer the matter, right? So we talked about this. So the current space-time relativity that we are living in, it's relativity because it's very relational in the sense that, north, south, east, west. If you look at the space, go out deeper in some other galaxy or whatnot, there's no such thing as north, south, east, west. It is something that we have defined as this is north. That's why east exists, west exists, south exists. So in that sense, it is relative, isn't it? Because there is a desire, and desire wants to think about more time, right? You want to fulfill a desire, you're going to need time. That creates your future. And the anguishes from the past that cause this desire, maybe, that creates your past, creates regrets, creates desires, right? So this is your limited existence on this planet. And what science is also trying to say is that while there are forms that you see, but the form is made out of formless, the consciousness. So there is a very interesting scientist currently. He's a computer scientist, mathematician, Donald Hoffman. You can Google him. He said, he has some really interesting observations. Conscious realism is what he creates a term, makes a bold claim: consciousness, not space-time and its objects, is fundamental reality and is properly described as a network of conscious agents. So what we are living in today is, if you think about it, right, a computer is probably a good example. Computer, there is the motherboard, there's keyboard, mouse, and all that, and these little minute transistors, zeros and ones are represented. Then a memory is created, a program is created, program sits on other programs for you to give this notion of a window, these letters, and things like that. So everything is emergent, if you will, right? So if you really look at it, what you see here, this red color, really at the foundational level of it, it is just a transistor. And what is transistor made out of? It's just some kind of sand, really. So what this red line here on the screen has appeared emergent, seems very real to us, but deep within, it's really the same thing. All across, this black color, this green color, everything is just a bunch of transistors playing a role, hardware, a bunch of electrons playing some kind of a activity down there for us to create this, right? So it's an emergent behavior. Everything comes out of, he calls them as conscious agents. To earn its keep, so this is a theory that he is working on. He thinks that we have spent way too much time scientifically in the space-time relativity. He has taken a completely different direction to science, where he is saying that eventually, if he was to be taken seriously, conscious realism must do some serious work ahead. It must ground a theory of quantum gravity, explain the emergence of our space-time interface. You see, he uses this term interface. Basically, I, as a human being, am looking at you, but consciousness is using all of this stuff just like we are using the mouse and keyboard. My eyes and my ear are an interface to this world. And it could also be an interface to the consciousness, right? So are your eyes and the world, right? So he uses the term interface and its objects, right? Explain the appearance of Darwinian evolution within that interface. Like, how did this life came about, right? So he is studying that, and he's working with a bunch of other scientists, which is really interesting and comes very close to what Vedanta, or, really, I mean, I think if you really look at deeper understanding of any religion, and if you were to query Christ or Muhammad or whoever, right, they have this understanding about oneness among all of us and explain the evolutionary emergence of human psychology. Ultimately, that's the key, right? We are talking about conscious AI robots and things like that. I don't think that will ever happen. We will get close. They will be intelligent. They will do mechanical things, but for them to really appreciate a rose or appreciate this kind of discussion is going to be meaningless. One of the phrases that they use in this domain is like, you're trying to understand the ocean because we are using space-time relative tools, our thought process, we are always going to get up to the shore of the ocean and we'll stop. Now, the sea might recede because our technology is going to improve, but we are always going to be limited up to what we are going to try to understand off on the other side. The particles are, so we talked about this, right? So we'll just continue this. So we talked about this. Yeah. Now, from our day-to-day understanding of why this would be an interesting thing, it is just going to make us a little more better person. We are going to enjoy our day-to-day lives much better than this kind of understanding that there's this limited time I got to fulfill this, I have to enjoy this, I have to do this, and this guy's getting in the way and all of that stuff, right? So forget about proving it or not proving it and all of that stuff, right? Just the mere understanding of this is going to bring about a better outlook. And I mean, I can give a lot of my own personal examples. I'm not in any way a reached human being, but even in my the bottom 3 chakras that I live in, I do see a window of this reality that they are trying to portray here. So I just want to end this with a very important message on bhakti. One of our biggest saints in Indian, just the history has been this person, Mirabai. So she lived 1498, 1557. Quite revolutionary, I would say. So she grew up as this royalty, and then she marries this king. But in her childhood, because of her family being very religious and stuff like that, she basically declares herself as the consort of Lord Krishna, wife of Lord Krishna. But then she gets married because they think that, she's just a kid and she doesn't know what she's talking about and all that stuff, right? But she continues that on, right? In her head, she's completely acts as if she's the wife of Lord Krishna. Eventually, she leaves the king. The king actually tries to kill her, by giving her the poison and all that stuff. And there's an interesting story about, she does drink the poison, but then she's still saved. And she becomes a beggar, much like Buddha, right? He kind of leaves the palace and all that stuff. And remember, if you look at all our religious movements or even philosophical movements, they tend to be very male chauvinistic, right? There is not a presence of women, and which is unfortunate, right? So But here is this person back in 1400s, 1500s, right? She comes from a very, religious background, and she rebels. And it's a very subversive, feministic way of looking at, using the common vernacular God and all of that stuff to really fight the social evils, if you will. And people would call her all kinds of names. It would be, but her legacy has been left behind, right? So there are some interesting poetries and poems that she has left behind. And one that I would end here with is this Saso ki mala pe simru mein pi ka naam. So remember, all of her bhakti movement or her whole philosophy is about love. And if you think about Muslim, the Sufism, right? Sufis also consider themselves as the beloved of Lord, right? Man, woman, whoever, everybody. And everything is based around love. And remember, we talked about this earlier, right? For you to calm your mind, calm your thoughts, you're going to need heart. So what this line means in Hindi or in our language is, I bead my beloved's name on the garland of my breaths. So every breath that I take, it's about the beloved. So, we actually do become, remember I said how we are many eyes and we become one eye. If you have ever been intensely in love with somebody, those moments, even mother-son, those moments, mother-daughter, those moments, right? You will realize that, there's no ego or there's no desire, anything, you are you, you're pure yourself. And that is something that, can help you understand that, yep, that is real. So we have gone through that kind of phase in our lives with some other human being. And then she goes on to say, har har mein har base. So har is another word that is used in many different contexts. Aur har ko har ki aas. Har ko main dhoond firi, aur har hai mere paas. So the meaning here is, in everyone and everything, I see my beloved alone. So she's so intensely in love with him. And everyone seems longing for that lover. And she says, I was lost searching for my beloved out there and found my love here near me. So now all of this, the beloved and all of this, can really literally be replaced by Brahman or consciousness. And when you come to that state, there are different ways to go about it. If you believe in a deity, if you believe in God, and then you can go to some other extent, which is like, let's say science is something that drives you, to become happy and you feel like you've achieved it. Or every action that you do that, brings about happiness to you, you can start seeing, you can start having this kind of an attitude, right? That is going to get you from the many eye state to the single eye state. And that would be the journey upwards, right? So anyways, I think today's session went way too long. I don't know where we are, 3:50. Sorry about that. Okay, so who's that? Jacob, I guess. Go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah. Journey is time, and time is an illusion invented by the mind. The mind is the movement of time.
Yeah,
if you
absolutely.
take time, you are strengthening the illusion. If you say, not now, later, let me think about it, that is the movement of time. It's a psychological movement, and it is what's preventing the flowering of true love. Now, not tomorrow. And the mother, by the way, doesn't love the child. The mother is exploiting the child for her own benefit. She loves her child, but she doesn't, she says she thinks she loves her child, but she doesn't love the other children of the world. That is not true love. So what passes for love is a limitation, imitation, and distortion of true love, right? So what will give birth to true love, right? What will give birth to what you call the Brahman, right? Because right now, who's speaking, right? Well, is Jacob speaking? Jacob being the finite, the limited, a bundle of chaos, disorder, violence? Or is the Brahman speaking now, right? So where is the thoughts coming from? That's the question. Where is the thinking coming from? Is it coming from a brain body that is trapped by programming, conditioning, right? A slave to the past, right? Or
Yeah. So
is
Jacob,
it
can I,
Yeah, yeah.
a brain that is
Jacob, can I interrupt you for a second? So Jacob, I think we have been studying about these exact same things for last whatever 10, 15 lectures or group sessions that we have been doing. Can we bring it down to chapter 8? You know, we have a bunch of people who want to also talk, and we have to end the session in like 5 minutes. So I'm so sorry. Fred, I totally agree with you, Jacob, right? So Fred, can you ask what you wanted to say?
Yeah, getting back to the presentation, great presentation. I really liked your explanation of the chakras and the ladder of progress, and great poem at the end. Really good. But I wonder that there are, for us Westerners, there are people who are not particularly materialistic, but can be hyper competitive. And they take the ladder and the progress as a challenge, and they say, you know, by golly, I'm going to vault up the 8 rungs of the ladder in record time, and I'm going to go from Prakriti to Avatya, unity with Krishna in one lifetime. Now, I take it, I don't get that directly from the presentation, but kind of take that's sort of a form of egoism that doesn't sound consonant with the process that you described. And as an example, one might speculatively say Steve Jobs is a sort of a person like that. Is that kind of in other words, the egoism of following this practice, is that paradoxically a form of egoism which also has to be overcome?
Yeah. So that the going up the ladder, remember that journey that we talked about where we are conversing with ourselves. We're not competing with anybody else, right? So we are not here to show off to somebody else that, hey, look, I'm on ladder number 4. You are only on ladder number 3. No, there's no such thing. There is no such test out in the world. You are your own judge. You're your own teacher. You're your own person who is going to watch yourself, what happens in real situation of anger, fear out there in transacting. Are you actually getting disturbed in your mind? Then, you know, you've dropped down in that circle, right? So you're not really competing with anybody. And the fact that you have reached up there, if you feel that you are better than other people, you're already down at the bottom layer, right? So that thought will bring you down. There's no certification, there's no black belt that you're going to get. So there is no ego ride, because you have already left the ego when you come to a existential crisis, like see with Arjuna's situation, or, you know, I think, Fred, you were there in our Kathopanishad class as well, right? Where, do you remember the Kathopanishad where the child goes to Yama, the
Yes.
death, right? So
Tie in here, yeah.
yeah, so it kind of ties in here, right? So these are the existential crises that come about in our lives, where, you know, you come to a point where, you know, in Kathopanishad, Nachiketa basically says, look, my dad has said that hell with you. You go to death. So I give you to death, right? Effectively. So he says, I really don't want my father to be going to hell because of this statement. So help me understand, what is this? What is this life, right? Why is my father angry? Why am I here? And what is death and all of that stuff, right? So you come to this Anahat Chakra, which is chakra number 4, right? Bottom 3, you come to the 4th level. By the time you come to the 4th level, you're really questioning everything, in the sense that, who am I? Why am I getting bothered by XYZ? What does it mean for me to be a father? What does it mean for me to be a mother, right? All of those questions, it's an existential crisis. So you have to come to this Anahat Chakra, where the curiosity becomes the driving force for you to like start moving up. Now, if you bring it in the context of other people and say, hey, look, man, I'm doing this meditation, I'm feeling very good, and look, I don't have any ego and all that. No, you have really come back to rung number 2, because it's again back to your own worldly limited state of affairs, right? So there is no ego ride as you move up, right? Okay, so Fred, we're going to move along. Tristan.
First of all, thank you very much. I'm interested in some of the more small ecclesiastic movements within Hinduism, like, for example, the Bhakti movement. Are there any, recommended readings you could have for some of these smaller religious sects that came out of the movement, especially during the later medieval period in India's history?
Yeah, actually, these are not very small movements, by the way, right? These are, they are still very much alive, and there is innumerable amount of interesting people like Mirabai, there's Janabai, there is Kabir, like, again, the journey is pick anything. It's not about gathering knowledge. We tend to be hoarders. Many me's is one of the outcomes, is that, the next level of many me's is, hey, I'm learning about Christianity, Islam. I'm learning about so many different movements. Learn. The learning is supposed to bring you to that existential crisis. Hopefully life brings you to the existential crisis, and then you kind of start moving upwards, right? And it really doesn't matter. You like the poetries that Mira has written, or, if you don't understand Indian language, there is so many things that you can pick from Christianity, St. Francis, or, St. Teresa, or I don't know. There's got to be many different things that you can relate with. And once you have this foundation of this understanding that, it's not about so much about understanding or learning or appreciating this poetry, but really, is it going to help me move upwards? Whatever I'm doing, even when I'm doing math, I've written a small play. I was actually thinking of reading that today. It was a very short one, but it is about a computer science class, and then there's a teacher and a student having this conversation. And I sort of alluded to the computer science example. And it's interesting, what bubbles out of that is this very higher level of, like, the student comes to a point like, who am really I? Why do I think like this? This computer is a software. Am I a software? And it's really interesting. Like, you can take any of your mundane things in the world and try to think, so that's what he's talking about. There's the subjective reality and the objective reality. The Purusha and Prakriti is in everything. So what we tend to do is we tend to be focused on Prakriti, but we got to look at the subjective side of it. So Mira is a great, if you can get her book of poetries, I'm sure it's a translation that's a problem. Kabir is another very interesting person. Guru Nanak, for example, right, the Sikhism, they took the studies from Kabira and they made that into a religion, a sect. That is also an interesting doctrine and religion that Guru Nanak created. But yeah, there's plenty to go about. Yeah. All right, John.
Hi, Shashi.
Ah.
So I thought what you were saying was kind of interesting with Arjuna fighting, against the enemy in a war, and then you go bring it closer, and you're fighting against yourself in a sense on this, on this journey. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so we talked about many me's, right? So many me's include me, how I behave with my wife, how I behave with my child, how I behave with my teacher, how I behave with my boss, right? So we change our personality depending on the situation. So why does that happen? Because we are in the transactional world. We are trying to agree or disagree with somebody. We are maybe angry with somebody. We are fearful of somebody, right? So if there was a war, let's say Americans are fighting with Muslim in the Iraq war, Americans don't know these people. So it's easy for you to send those missiles and attack them. The killing is not going to bother you. The Hiroshima Nagasaki event and all of that stuff, right? So we already had an impression about Japan that it's just an evil country, evil people, and the atomic bomb happened, right? So when we don't understand, we took them as objects. We thought of them as prakriti. We couldn't look at their subjective side. And so the war became easier. Now, when you come to fighting with your brother or your family members and stuff like that, there's a little bit of a subjective element that starts playing a role there. And it became harder for Arjuna, who is actually a very good person. Now, he has fought many wars in the past. He never really asked this question, but this is the time he asked this question to his friend, like, is this the right thing for me to do? Why not just lose right now? Why? I just don't want to win this kingdom if it means that I have to kill my loved ones, right? So he says that. Now, even more difficult, in my mind says, you love that person. The mind says, oh, wait a second, but they remember a week ago they did that. And then the mind is like creating this whole thing. And then you've learned about Gita and all that. The intellect is saying, remember, you have to be equanimous with everything, right? So now you have like 3 different elements in you trying to fight with each other. One wants to love the person, the other wants to fight that hateful situation, and one of them is saying, no, you got to be spiritual in this situation, right? So it becomes a very hard thing because you know that there was something that was done that was very hurtful to you. So you are trying to fight that. You're trying to not react to the situation, which is what the mind wants you to do, either overly love somebody or overly hate somebody, right? Both is going to cause an element of otherism. And so this battle is even more difficult than Arjuna's battle. Arjuna at least has another human being there. And, eventually he will be convinced to kill those people because they have done some evil things, right? So he will use his sword and rip through them. But with us, if we don't have this understanding, we will either like create an angry situation with the person because you think that you're justified. And one of the amazing things about, I think Jacob was talking about how mothers love for their son and not love for other kids, right? That's a very important point. It's easier for us to kind of hide the mistakes of our son versus another son, for example, right? So when the problem comes closer to us, we find justifications for the fault. We give them the benefit of doubt. When it comes even more closer, you say, aha, that situation, I better teach this person that this is wrong because I'm justified in this, right? And so it becomes even more harder. And that particular other has really won the battle and you have lost because your horse that is carrying the chariot has completely gone haywire and has created this angry situation, and you probably will utter some horrible words in that situation, right? So does that make sense, John?
Yeah, it does. I'm just trying to understand, so what's the solution to that problem then, in terms of the
Good.
spiritual advancement, so to speak, of you being so close to yourself?
Correct. So I think the situation here is that when you are, remember I talked about this yogic practice, right? Where as the thoughts are coming to you, and this is also part of the samurai learning thing, right? If you're interested, you can try to understand from their literature too, is that, am I pulling this sword out of anger or fear? That's the question that you want to ask. Something has happened. Is there a way for me to not react right now? And I will take an action later on. Now, some of this has been captured in a lot of these help series of books, right? Where they say, you know what, if you're angry, sleep on it, and then tomorrow morning you might react better, right? So that is all coming from this place as well, right? So is that when the thoughts come to you, you get caught up in that thought. You don't understand that thought has arisen in your mind and it has a short life. If you give it time, it is going to dissipate. And when it dissipates, when you reacted to that thought, you are now going to react in the opposite way. Here you got angry, now you're going to feel guilty. And we live our lives with a whole connection of anger, guilt, anger, guilt, anger, guilt, anger, guilt, anger, guilt. And we never really enjoy anything in life eventually, if you look at it that way. So the idea is that, let's say you do want to tell that other person that this is happening, you need to purify your thought process, right? And that purification comes about with this kind of a calming your mind. Is that somebody, whatever they did, is my mind, are there waves rising in it? Waves rising in the sense, is there anger coming up or fear coming up or whatnot, right? When that is happening, you suddenly want to say, okay, mind, shut up, right? Calm down. You just take deep breaths and calm yourself down. And now you come to a place where you say, okay, all right, that's happening. Do I want to react? If I react, it is going to cause more waves in my mind. Or what should I do? And, when you come to this state where you are constantly watching your mind, the action that is going to come out of you, where let's say, maybe some people do deserve for you to get angry over them, or you do want to tell them that, hey, what you did was wrong, yet I love you, right? But I want you to understand that this is wrong, right? So the interaction that you will have might have more impact. And maybe there is no interaction needed, right? So a lot of it was something that you have built up in your mind because you don't know the other side. You don't know the reality. So my point is that the way to address this battle situation is that any interaction that you're doing out there, if it is going to cause any flutter in your mind, any kind of thought process, any kind of feeling towards it or against it, just stop right there. Don't react, don't do anything, because you're not in the right mindset to fight. There's actually a small story about samurai who he's almost about to hit his enemy, and he's going to win that war, that fight. And he brings the sword down and he stops. The other person who's going to die, he says, why did you stop? I mean, you can kill me now. The samurai says, no, I think I got angry there with you. And he walks away, right? So it kind of, in a nutshell, sort of like, if you are reacting out of anger, out of fear, then that is something that you got to watch out for. Anyways, I think that we've gone way past the time here.
Interesting, thank you.
Right. So
can I just ask one quick question?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just based off of like actually kind of last time and this time as well. And it had to do with the idea of the sacred ohm.
Mm.
Yeah, and the basically that's the beginning of like the first sound of the universe, essentially, as far as I'm understanding it. And is that the equivalent? And I had a conversation with somebody offline about this. Is that the equivalent of, would you say, in the Gospel of John, in the beginning is the Word?
Sorry, repeat that last part again.
Would you say and that would be the equivalent of in the Gospel of John, in the beginning was the Word?
Oh, in the beginning was the
sacred.
word. Yes, effectively, yes. So it's sort of similar. Yes, you're right. Yeah, and most religions do that, right? Most books, if they all basically, it's funny how this has happened. Now, there is no connection between these writers in Veda or writers in biblical books or even Islam or any other religion, right? They all go back to the sound. It's really interesting. In the beginning, there was the word, right? And then everything comes out of it. So it's sort of like saying that, Om is just a nonsensical phonetic word. It's supposed to represent the consciousness, right? So the ultimate reality, if you will, or the foundation of everything. So when I'm saying so, or the words that are coming out of my mouth, they are coming out of these three vowels, A, U, M, and you are making sense of it. So these words come about, and words define the reality that we see out in Prakriti, the nature. So the nature outside, there is the forms. You can actually see the physical linings and all that stuff outside there. Inside our mind, there are words that represent that. That is our so-called transactional reality. So these words that we have made up for sky, earth, man, woman, all of that, right? So we have to understand that they come from letters. Letters come from this original sound, the sound of the universe, if you will. The universe is speaking just with that silence or the Om, right? And that is the first time Brahma wakes and Vishnu and Mahesha, Shiva, and then it goes back, right? So it happens again and again and again. And while all these words are happening, there must have been many different human existences, right? Human species were born, I don't know, gazillion years ago or something, right? They might have spoken some different language than us altogether. We speak English. They must have had a different communication mechanism, but that mechanism came out of, see, these words make sense because of our consciousness, right? So ultimately, who is really understanding, interpreting, enjoying these words? It's the consciousness. Consciousness is uttering it, and consciousness is listening to it. So that consciousness is where the utterance is happening. That is the foundation of the Om. Everything comes out of it, and then everything is understood by the consciousness. Anyways, yeah. But yeah, there is somewhat of a similarity with that sentence you said. Yeah.
Yeah, it creates an experience. So I was just thinking the same thing, is that it creates space in the I don't know in the universe. Any case, well, thank you, Sashi. Shall we go ahead and close it up from here, or do you have anything else?
You can stop the recording, and then we're done. Thank you, guys. This was great. And then